Hi, this is Lisa, and you are listening to I Love That Movie. This podcast is for movie lovers. It's not an unbiased opinion, it's not a straightforward review, it's just a couple people talking about a movie that they love. The format is each week I have a guest, and that guest and I discuss a movie that they love, something they're obsessed with, something they connect with. We'll talk about the plot, the director, and the actors, but we'll also talk about the personal connection my guest has with that movie. So if that sounds like something you want to listen to, keep listening. Hello, this is Lisa, and if you want to catch up with me on X or Twitter, that's at ILTM Podcast. I'm also on Instagram at I Love That Movie Podcast, and we have a Patreon. The show is always free, but if you want to support me on there, you can. That's at patreon.com/I Love That Movie. And if you sign up, you do get a weekly bonus episode of everything else I'm watching. Sometimes people ask me, what new shows am I watching, what movies? That's where all that kind of current stuff goes. But on here, we'll talk a little bit about the movie that my guest loves. And on that note, I want to turn it over to my new guest. Say hello, Carlo. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Carlo, like you said, and it's a pleasure to be here first time. And if you want me to run the whole introduction now, I always say that I'm a movie lover by heart and a computer technician by necessity, meaning that I work in IT, but my real passion is movies. I've been hosting my podcast, The Movie Loot, for around 5 years. We're in a bit of a hiatus right now, but we're trying to pick up things and start the year with strength. I also launched a new podcast, a second podcast. It's called Popcorn con Mavi, and it's a bit more niche because it's a podcast in Spanish. I'm from Puerto Rico, and Spanish is my native tongue. And we'll be focused on Puerto Rican cinema. So I'm trying to keep busy with podcasting.
Wow, that sounds really exciting. That's awesome. And where can people find your podcast?
They can find the Movie Loot and the Movie Loot on any podcasting platform, Spotify, Apple Podcast, you name it. The new podcast, if there's any Spanish listener or Puerto Rican listener, is exclusively on YouTube for now. But I am on Blue Sky. I'm still hanging on Twitter by the clip of my nails. But I'm still there. They can find me at ThiefCGT, ThiefCGT, and the podcast has TMML 2021. And on Blue Sky is Movie Loot, and they can find it there as well.
That's great. And so if those listening have not heard my podcast before, basically, each episode I have a guest. We talk about a movie that they love. So the guest chooses the movie because I get a lot of questions that say, when you talk about this movie, let me know, or, can I talk about this? Like, yes, actually you pick the movie. So on that note, Carlo, what movie did you choose to talk about today?
Well, I choose. It was interesting because when you first reached me, it was before Christmas, and
Yes.
you said let's do something Christmassy, and most of the options that we bounced around you had already covered,
I
or I
know.
wasn't maybe that interested. So when we postponed until now, I thought, this is the movie that I want to talk about, and I chose a movie. It's a Swedish movie called Aniara from 2018, and it's a movie that I saw a couple of. Well, do you want me to jump into the questions right now?
Oh, well, before we jump into that,
Yeah.
we should probably do a quick summary.
Yeah,
You can watch this movie. You told me, Carlo, I had not seen this film before. Really glad that you chose it. It's very exciting. Came out in 2018. But
yeah.
you told me to look to either Hulu or Disney Plus, and that was exactly right. You can watch it on there if you have a subscription. I will share with my audience that we don't really do like a spoiler filled and spoiler free, just because we're kind of going to jump all over the place and talk about whatever we want to talk about next, just a natural conversation. So you may want to pause here if you haven't seen this film,
Oh yeah.
but if not, and you're still with us, I'm going to read a very short synopsis. So, essentially, this movie is about a spacecraft that's carrying settlers to Mars after there's an apocalypse on Earth. When it strays off course, the consumption obsessed passengers are prompted to consider their place in the universe. Again, pretty vague. We're going to dive into it a
Yeah.
little bit more, but I feel like, Carlo, you were in the middle of explaining like how you happened upon this, and that was going to be my next question. Actually, was how did you learn about this film? How did you first see it?
Yeah, well, one of the gimmicks or the main gimmick of my podcast, The Movie Loot, is that I start each month with a set of categories of what to watch. It's kind of like a way to guide me into what to watch. For example, a film from the '60s or a film directed by this or that director. And sometimes I throw like playful categories. For example, a film where the main character is your namesake, or a film having to do with aliens or stuff like that. And that particular month, this was, I checked the dates. Let me just confirm. It was April 2020, and one of the categories that I had for my podcast was a film based on a poem. So I started Googling films based on poems, and I came up with a website that mentioned this film. I read a quick synopsis. I was intrigued, so I decided to check it out, and it was on Hulu at that time, and it's still on Hulu, and it really captivated me. I was intrigued with the synopsis, and I was captivated with the film from the get-go. I've seen it. I rewatched it a year later, in
Wow.
2021, and I think I loved it more. And I my third time was a couple of days ago when I was preparing for this podcast.
Nice. Okay, so you've seen it about three times.
Yes, yes.
And how do you pronounce it one more time? I'm always afraid I'm going to say it wrong. Aniara? Aniara?
Aniara. Yeah,
Aniara. Okay. Um, yeah, this is a, like you said, 2018 Swedish Danish science fiction film. And it's an adaptation of a 1956 Swedish epic poem of the same name by Harry Martinson.
yeah,
And that I thought that alone was interesting based on a poem. I just don't feel like you see a lot of movies based on a poem, first of
yeah,
all. But it's kind of a long, a little bit of a complex storyline, even though it's only like an hour and 40 something minutes.
yeah,
But yeah, it's essentially in a dystopian future, kind of like we talked about at the beginning, where Earth is just uninhabitable, and it's prompting this big migration from Earth to Mars. And then you mentioned also that you didn't know kind of the twist yet, so you kind of went in not really knowing
yeah,
what was going to happen in the
yeah,
film, which I think was probably the best way to view it. I did not really look up anything about it either. I just kind of briefly saw, oh, it's about traveling to Mars, and that's all I saw. So I didn't know the twist that was coming, but as it came, I just kind of had this feeling. I was like, this is just not going to get better, is it? For these poor passengers. In fact, I have a lot of thoughts about this, and I'm sure we're going to talk about them. But the next thing I kind of wanted to do before we dive in a little bit further is I like to share some really quick facts about the film. And I only have a couple here. You'll notice
yeah,
that my research is really predominantly from either Wikipedia or IMDb. I mean, that's where the good stuff is. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll kind of go on a little bit further. But again, the original adaptation of the poem I talked about already, so that's one quick fact that we've already kind of covered. But the name Aniara was poet Harry Martinson's invention. So he supposedly came up for it to mean the name for space in which the atoms move while reading astronomer Arthur Stanley Eddington.
yeah. Another thing that I sort of on that line, but I also read that the word Aniara, even though he came up with it, is sort of derived from a Greek word that means despair, which is I think is very
Oh,
very apropos to the
interesting.
movie. Yeah,
Yeah. And I don't think we talked a little bit about the poem, but I did want to also mention another part of one of the quick facts I looked at was that it's also 103 cantos. So, pretty long
yeah,
book length
yeah.
poem, which I don't think I've ever read a book length poem. Have you read the poem yourself?
I found it. It's on the internet, and I think I read big chunks of it. I don't remember if I read it whole, but I remember I read big chunks of it shortly after watching the film because I was just obsessed with the film after my
Oh,
first time, and it has just become like a quick favorite. So when you threw the ball at me, I said, I can talk about
yeah, pick
my
whatever you
favorite
want.
movie,
Hmm.
Shawshank Redemption or Seven, but I probably you covered those, and
Hmm.
everybody expects to talk about that, and I like to bring obscure movies and sort of throw you a left curve. So I became obsessed, and I started like looking for stuff about the movie, and I think I
Oh,
found the
great.
poem, and I read like I said, big chunks of it, but I don't think I
Oh,
read it all.
nice. Okay. Well, I want to turn it over to you then because it sounds like you've done a lot of your own research. Are there any like quick facts that you kind of wanted to dive into before we start looking at like the plot, the directors, the actors, and things like that?
Well, actually, the two main facts that I had written were the ones that you mentioned. That it's
Okay.
based on a poem that has 100 or so cantos. That the name about the name, but I was in my probably parallel research, so to speak. I started looking for stuff about the directors. The film is co-directed by two people, Bela Kagerman and Hugo Lilja, who I'm sorry if I mispronounce those names, but they work together often. And one interesting fact is that I looked a short film that was directed by Bela Kagerman, the one of the directors. It's a short film called Reckless,
Mm-hmm.
and it was interesting because the film treated like a similar theme about it's set in a city that is underwater for some probably dystopic reason, and you have a depressed lead character, a female lead character that's struggling with she was left by her boyfriend or something, and it's very short, but it has that same bleak approach to it, and I thought it was interesting to watch that as well as a sort of companion to Aniara.
Oh, that was going to be my question for you is if you had, watched anything else by the director. Like you said, it was co-directed. I was looking at Reckless while you were talking about it, so I'll have to check that out. Where can you see it?
I think I found it. I did a quick Google search, and I think I found
Mm.
a New Yorker website where they had the short available. So maybe you can
Oh,
find that
okay.
too.
Great.
If I
Yeah,
can find it, I can shoot you the link. So
Oh, for sure. Thank you. Yeah, it looks like this director hasn't done a ton of things yet besides this movie, but it's certainly, I think
yeah.
it's a very ambitious film, for a
Oh yeah.
first time. And yeah, because it is a Swedish film, or Swedish Danish film, I don't know a lot about the actors either.
Yeah.
Does anyone in the cast stand out to you, or have you seen them before?
I hadn't seen any of them, and I don't think I've seen anything from any of them. But I was really impressed by the whole cast. I
I
think
agree.
the main character, the MR or Mima Rogue, played by Emily Johnson, she plays like uh, she attends this uh, spa-like place
Mm-hmm.
where people go to relieve images of Earth, and controlled by like a AI computer called the Mima.
Mm-hmm.
And I found her subtle,
Mm-hmm.
and restrained, but very powerful. She has a lot of emotions and goes through a
Yeah.
lot of ups and downs as you see despaired, and you see her frustrated, and you see her suddenly energized or thrilled by different things through the course of the movie, which is one of the things that I found more interesting, the way that these characters cling to different things trying to
Yeah.
find hope and meaning in the middle of this in, whether it is parenthood, whether it is some goal to do something or find something. I found that interesting, and her performance all through it's. I thought it was very. I uh, I don't know if you have to say anything about her, but
No, I agree. I think, throughout the film, I was looking at kind of studying her performance, and it's almost like she reminded me of someone else that I couldn't quite put my finger on while I watched it. But I really liked I mean, she kind of grounds the film. She's the main character,
yeah.
and she encounters a lot of different personalities throughout it. But it's her journey really that we're following throughout, and I think she really does a great job of carrying the film. But there wasn't really a character I disliked. Even the characters that I think come across as antagonistic, I actually end up having a lot of empathy for, and really the movie's not so much obviously about the destination. It's about the journey, but
Yeah.
in more ways than one. But I really appreciated her performance too. Well, I guess because the cast is relatively unknown, at least to us, maybe we'll talk a little bit about some of your favorite scenes or like some of the things that really drew you into this movie and made you, like you said, kind of fall in love with it, become obsessed with it.
Well, I was thinking, is there a scene in particular that grabs me, and there really, I can't think of a single scene that's like, oh, this is a scene that grabs me, but it's a whole journey, like you're saying. It's something that I you know I I'm usually drawn. My favorite genre, I used to say, was thrillers, but uh, more often than not, now I'm more drawn like to sci-fi, and especially high concept sci-fi films. I'm usually now more drawn to that kind of genre. I've always liked dark and bleak films and dark and bleak endings, and I think this film has
I do
one of the
too.
biggest ones. It's
Yeah.
very dark, very bleak, and it's a film that I don't know, crept under my skin and kept me thinking. And when it finished, I was like, wow, what did I just watch? And it just stuck with me. And I've always liked films. I don't know what all of this says about me, but I like films that show societal collapse, and I
Hmm.
think that it's very interesting because you get to see as the years pass. We're like I said, we're spoiling a bit of it, but the years pass and they are still in this ship, and you get to see the slow decay of society within the
Yeah,
ship. And but at the same time, in this collapse, you also get to see a new society forming. You get to
that's
see,
true.
for example, the captain was just a captain, but now he's just like a president or governor or leader. The mimo robe, who was more of a store attendant in a mall, all of a
Hmm.
sudden has a very important role in this new society because people
Ah,
are moving towards this the mima, this AI that I was talking about. It was they were they were barely having any attendance, but as
yeah.
soon as people realize we're stuck here in the ship, then she has to deal with rows of people coming in, and she has to ask for help. um, and it's really interesting because it's the way that people want to relive a better place or a better Earth, which is why I have the background,
Oh,
which people
nice.
people can't see right now, but it's one of the images that the main character relieves when during one of those sessions in the Mima, and I think it's very appropriate. Now we need to uh, relive better places and better times to forget
Yeah.
what we're really living. Um, but all of that was really interesting and obsessive to me. I also want to talk a bit about the captain because that's another character that I was really intrigued about.
I
Um,
agree. I agree. Like when I was rereading the like the plot, because sometimes I'll do that, especially if I've only seen a film once. I'll like watch the whole movie, then I'll read the plot just to make sure I like captured everything.
Yeah.
And I think what stood out to me is is exactly who I was thinking of with at the beginning. He comes across as antagonistic, somewhat paternal, and patronizing, right? Of like, I'm the decision maker, I'm deciding everything.
Yeah.
But there's a level of, I think, compassion towards the end that we feel for him. Or there's when I really sat back and thought about it, I thought about his character very differently from like what he's projecting as to what's actually happening to him, I think. But
It,
go ahead.
I think he goes like the MR, the main character. I think he goes through different ups and downs, different
Yeah, absolutely.
stages in how he deals with the situation. And like I said, he's in a different role. He's the leader. He's the captain, and he soon has to like he thinks, I have to take this leadership role. I was actually watching an interview with the actor Arvin Kananian. That's his name, if I'm pronouncing it right. But and he said that he and the filmmakers, they imagined that this character had a military background, so he
Yeah,
had to like be like, I had to be strong, I had to be restrained, and I have to keep it together. Um, but I thought his performance was um, really, really subtle as well,
yes, agreed.
and very, very interesting, and how you see those shifts. And for example, there's a moment where the MR is asking him for something, and he says, "We can do whatever we want." And it's that
Yeah,
that like I said, that society forming what society is this and who's the leader and what can we do, what can't we do, which is why we see, we see religious sex cults popping up at some point. Yeah,
yeah,
and it's this society trying to find their place, and these characters trying to keep this captain just trying to keep like things together. Where is the hope? And for example, when they find this rescue probe or this probe that they think might help them, he suddenly, we have to announce this and we have to give people this hope. And towards the end, you see him change. For example,
yeah,
first chapter, he's clean cut, shaven. Then he has mustache. Then as years pass, he has beard, and suddenly you see him decay as well. You see him more, not necessarily slob, but he's more unkempt, and he's more, there's a shot towards the end where you see that he apparently tried to kill himself. um,
yeah.
I think it's really interesting to see a character that is a supporting character, and it's really subtle, more to the side, but has so many layers to him. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. He was exactly who I was thinking of, and I was thinking about the suicide attempt. And
Yeah,
in the beginning, like you said, he projects this united front. He's been in the military, so he understands like the need for secrecy, loyalty, things like that. And I mean, this is such a huge tragedy, right? I was going to ask you this question though, because I've been thinking about it since I watched it. So the plot of this movie is basically that it was supposed to take 3 weeks to get to Mars.
yeah,
Then there's a they encounter some
space debris.
debris or
Yeah,
yeah, and then they get put off course. And the I don't want to say the smarter people, because I don't think it's that they're smarter, but the more informed people, the astronomers and things like that, know right away, like, yeah, it's over. Like, we're the government, which is the people limited to this spaceship, are going to tell us all these great things and promises, but they know that it's over. But my question is, were they ever going to Mars? Like, a part of me wonders if even that was true. Like, I mean, did they all just load up on the spaceship and go, hey, we're going to do our best and we're going to try to get there? But maybe they kind of knew how precarious this mission was and that maybe it wasn't going to get there.
I think that at least what I get from the information that the film, I think, is giving us is that this is not the first trip. That this is like
Mm,
the
okay.
first chapter is called a routine journey,
That's
which is
right.
supposed to,
So people
this
have
is like,
made it. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I think that I don't know if even the MR has been there, because she says, I work here, so I get the feeling that she's been here and she's gone through this
Okay. Okay.
journey
That makes
at some
sense.
point. At least that's what I get.
But
And
still, I
oh,
guess they know right away, like, oh, any little
yeah.
thing that throws us off, it's all over, which is interesting.
Another thing that I just remember, and it's one of the things that another moment that I really like. There's a moment where a passenger is like getting crazy
Oh,
and
yeah.
losing control, and she tries to control him, but loses also, and she tells him, "You really want to go to Mars? There's nothing there, and nothing grows there."
Oh,
So
that's
you get the
right.
idea. She's been there as well, and
Yeah,
it
but she has like there's a vibe, I think, to the people that are more informed in the movie.
yeah.
They're not as optimistic, like right away. And
Oh yeah.
like the people that don't know, like in that moment, she's like, "Oh, you want to go there? There's nothing there anyway." It's like you're not leaving Earth to go to paradise. And no matter the best case scenario is still a worst case scenario. But
Yeah.
back to the captain really briefly, I think, I just want to make sure I get out the thought about what you said around the layers he has. When he shoots the I think she's the astronomer who's
Astronomer.
kind of like, we're in a sarcophagus, we're in a coffin, like we're not going anywhere. And she's like, and he's like, well, we need to present a united front, we need to bring people hope. And she's like, no, we don't, I'm not doing that. And then he shoots her. I think in that moment, at first I'm like, I hate this guy, like he's horrible. And then I think by the time he has that suicide attempt, you realize like he did what he thought was morally best. I think in that moment of like, we can't let people know how bad it really is. Like, I'm carrying the pain of how bleak our situation actually is and that we're in a coffin, but they have the power to like spare people from that truth, and he doesn't want to do that. And also I think it angers him, like somebody confronting him with the truth that like they're never getting off of here. I think he feels panicked and human, and shoots her.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's the astronomer, which is another of the more main characters or more important characters. Um, she knows from the beginning, like I said, she knows what they're in, and tells uh, uh, she tells more to the MR, which happens to be her roommate,
Hmm.
about that at some point. She said, there's no celestial body to turn at, which I also, and I can go on tangents all the way, but this is a very religious reference as well. There's no celestial body to turn at. No celestial body will help us, which you can see is a metaphor for God or something.
Yeah.
Um, but the thing is that the astronomer knows, and it's interesting how the one who's the leader, the captain, has to silence science, has to silence her.
Yes.
So I think it's also present, um, but how we have to he feels he has to like push science to the side in favor
Yeah.
of let's say peace, order, or whatever he feels he has to do.
Yeah, he's taken it upon himself to make all the decisions, but as you said earlier, he's not really qualified. But then if you expand that idea out, like, is anybody qualified to make all these decisions? I mean, and I think
Yeah,
that's what's so great about sci-fi is what it does is it takes the issues that we are dealing with today and puts them under a different lens in sort of a safe space where we can really examine them and have a little bit of distance. But it does make you think about that, right? It makes you think about, okay, when somebody is in power, like, how did they get there, and did they really get there because they were the best person of the job? Did they just happen to be there? I think there's
yeah,
something to be said, like you said, around the attendant who, like you said, was basically at a mall attraction. It becomes something so much more important that people want to be distracted by, which could be a metaphor for a lot of things: media, religion, whatever, right? Like at times I
yeah,
feel the experience they're having, it's like a church that they're going to, but at other times it's sort of hedonistic and just an escape. Like it's all very interesting, and you see so many different iterations of it. Sometimes I felt like they were just on a cruise, like when they were partying, it
yeah,
looked like
yeah.
a part of a cruise ship,
A
There's
casino,
just some,
slot
yeah, casino,
machines,
yeah, yeah, and
arcades.
right. And I don't know, my mind is shifting all over the place, but when her
Yeah,
partner
I know.
gets there's so many things that are covered in the movie. It's hard to but yeah, like when her partner, gets pregnant from the sex cult.
Yeah,
And she said she feels like she's giving birth to a prisoner. But I don't know if you had this thought. My first thought was, okay, that's true. But when she gives birth to this boy, this is all he's ever known. So he's not going to really feel like he's in
yeah,
prison, right?
yeah. That's his reality, and that's
Yeah.
um, it's I, I'm getting glimpse of other things that but for example, Room. Have you seen Room?
I have not, but I'm familiar with it.
Okay, well,
And yeah, I can see the parallel for sure.
yeah, but it's the same thing. This is his reality. So like you said, and that's a great way to put it. He's not gonna know anything else. So, this is his reality. So you can make whatever you want for him, and he will feel comfortable because this is all he knows. Um, but I think that that character is also very interesting. The MR's partner,
Hmm.
um, because it's also I find it really interesting how their paths cross at one point,
Yeah.
and then one of them declines, and while the other one rises because the her partner, her name is Isogel, I think. She's like a part of the crew of important,
She's a
like a
pilot, right? And
pilot. Yeah,
her roommate had a comment about pilots, about how because she cheats on her or she has sex with someone else
yeah,
and she doesn't seem phased or like she cares, and she's like, how can she be so cold? And her roommate makes a comment like, this is how pilots have turned out, because they're kind of nihilistic, because once you get out there, it's like there's nothing out there, and they know that, and so it affects their personality and their relationships once they know that that there's nothing out there to see. And
yeah,
I thought that was really profound.
yeah. But after they, she loses her position when they end up in prison because she hits someone, um, and but then the MR starts to assume like a more important role in the ship, while Isogel, her partner, it's her role is not that important anymore. And you see that contrast. I'm working on these things while she's in the apartment just taking care of the kid, and you see that um, resentment from her at
Yeah.
what she's leaving. And there's obviously the circumstances that led to her being pregnant. And so there are a lot of layers in this. I mean, it's like I said, I could go on 100 tangents, and
Yeah.
uh, there could be a lot to dig up on any way that we go.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And um, while we're talking about the child that they have, there's a part in the movie too where the captain says that the main character's focus should be on the children, because he's like, what
Yeah,
if one of these kids grows up and figures out figures a solution out of this? Which is like, can you imagine how long that would take? Like,
yeah, yeah.
that's
And you see that because there's years that they tell her that at, I think it was year 5, I think, or year 4,
hmm.
and then all of a sudden you get like 2, 3 or more of years until
Yeah,
they get um uh, some people train for this attempts that they're making to
right.
rescue or be rescued. So it's really uh, bleak and dark. I love it.
Yes. Yeah, and also when they find the probe, and they have no idea what it is, and they're just telling
Yeah,
everybody like, problem solved, we got this, and then they figure out that they really can't get anything out of it, and that there's nothing to gain from it. And that thought crosses my mind too, just like with the little tiny accident that happens that sets them off course. It's like, what are the odds that they would have, in all these years traveling around, magically run into fuel? Like, that doesn't even make sense. but
Yeah.
it's like literally their only option. And so it's just to me that felt realistic. Like that's more likely what would happen versus yeah, running into like a magical ship that has all the fuel they need.
And the interesting thing about that is that they stumble upon that probe in year 5. And
Hmm.
I find interesting that initially they think it's one thing. They think, this is probe. Do you think that for its size, do you think it can hold fuel? Well, it's this or that. When they finally grab it and they find it, it turns out that it's not what they thought. They can penetrate it. It's made of a material that they can describe. And they have no idea how to handle it. So it's interesting. What is it? How long has it been there? So it's this notion of are we alone? We're not alone. Are any more? Again, it's so many layers, so many things
Yeah.
to everything that happens, but also adds to what I think is the main thing in the film, which I've seen, which I've said several times, how people in this situation of despair and hopelessness try to cling to different things, trying to find hope and meaning, because this probe gives them like a purpose. We have to do
Yeah.
this, and we have to. When it wasn't probe, it was sex cults, and when it wasn't sex cults, it was arcades and casino machines. Uh, um, and when it's not that, it's having a baby, and when it's not that, it's other things. Towards the end, the MR gets busy with some reflections that she wants to like recreate what the Mima did. So there's always this attempt to distract our minds from
Hmm.
what is really happening. Towards the end, well, nothing helped. Uh,
Right.
and we were talking about the captain, and in that interview that I was listening with the actor, one of the things that he said, the interviewer asked him, "What do you think is the point of the movie, or what do you think about the movie's about?" I said, "The world is fucked up, and there's no turning back." And
Oh,
and
great.
and
Hooray.
he was laughing, but he was serious, and I thought
Yeah.
it was sobering to see someone speak
Sure.
so candidly about the bleakness of the film, because like I said, it's really really bleak.
Yeah, I feel
I'm
at
sorry, I
some
didn't know if I can
point.
swear. I'm sorry
Oh
if
no,
I.
that's fine. Yeah, there's no that's totally fine. Um I I would say at times in the movie, like during the, I guess, like the cold part that we talked about earlier, I thought like in some ways we're seeing, because everyone's like trapped on this spaceship and there's nowhere to go and there's no real like structure to their lives. It's almost like you're watching civilization reform, like you said, and that's why it's like
Yeah,
kind of going through all these different phases.
yeah,
I thought that was really interesting. And yeah, and in some ways, I think it's just maybe just a commentary on humanity and like they left Earth because it was so messed up, and yet they're kind of in some ways recreating that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
hellscape within their own, within
By
the
by
spaceship, because they can't leave themselves, right? Like they're going to still be human whether they leave the Earth or not. They're just bringing all that with them in some ways.
Yeah, it's part of the when the Mima breaks down. That's what the Mima says. The Mima says,
Yeah.
I'm being tormented by mankind. I just
Yeah.
can't handle, because to people that are listening, if you haven't seen the film, this Mima kind of like reads your thoughts and tries to recreate what's on your mind, to give you like a peaceful recreation of Earth. But as soon as people start coming in droves to this place, she becomes like overloaded with all the things that people are thinking, and the Mima itself says, mankind is killing me. So I think that's right there in your face, and it, it's what, by year 24, they're already like, like a dozen people only living there. So
Yeah. Yeah, because when they go in and they like think about Earth, like, yeah, at first they're kind of like thinking about all the happy stuff, but then they start thinking about their last moments on Earth. So that's pretty much the only information we get about what happened to Earth is like we see flashes of like fire and people being suffering, and yeah, eventually the AI is like, oh, the Earth was awful, and actually you're awful and you
Yeah,
caused this, and he becomes suicidal just like all the passengers do.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting, honestly. Like
And
you said,
and
lots of different layers to it.
And to that point, I think the film does a great job in exposition because they don't do a proper exposition dump of what's happening, but you see things and you get these flashes at the beginning, but you see people, several people that are burned, and you wonder why.
That's
But
right.
but
Yeah.
it gives you the idea. Okay, something happened on Earth that has these people severely burned or scarred, or and gives you that idea that things aren't so well on Earth, and that's why they're moving.
Yeah. And I think that revelation too that you talked about earlier, where we find out even Mars is not great. You know, even the place
Yeah,
they're going to, they have to distract themselves with the casinos, with the dancing and all that, even in the best case scenario, because they're not headed to a great place.
it's surviving, not
Yeah, they're
living. It's
just
just
surviving.
survival.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is skipping too far ahead. I mean, it is because it's kind of the end. But like you said, by year 24, basically, it's just a few people left. The Mima Robe and a few survivors. And then it cuts ahead again to year like 5,000 something or almost 6,000 years in the
Five
future.
million.
Oh, 5 million. Sorry. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right. Uh-oh, that was kind of funny right there. Thousand versus million. Anyways. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, like they finally, the ship, I guess, kind of gets to a planet that's like Earth, but literally everyone's dead by then, which, like you said, is like the
Five
extremely
million.
bleak answer. Yeah. So they would
But they
have,
got there.
yeah, they got there. But yeah, they were never going to make it. You know, we see all these years past year 5, year 10, and then year 24, and it's already really bad. And then, like you said, it jumps to 5 million. It's like that's the end.
It's that final chapter. I think it's funny in a very dark way because the jump is
Yeah.
like, whoa, what's happening here? But it's bleak, and it's so hopeless. I don't know, but
Very. Yeah.
what mainly what I get from this is that you 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 can't be so focused on the goal, on where you're heading to. You have to do
Yeah.
something with the journey, and you said something to that effect. um if you keep yourself focused, we have to get there. You're going to miss the journey, and you're going to mess things up towards the journey because you're going to be focused on that. And I think there could have been ways where they could have made things better for themselves if they would have just focused. We're uh, doomed to stay in the ship, so let's make things uh, better for ourselves, and not worry about getting anywhere. We're just going to be drifting here until we die. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a really a gut punch of an ending.
I think it's, we don't have, or we believe that we have this control over our destiny, over where we're
Yeah,
headed, and we make plans and all that, but we don't have a lot of control. And so, like you said, it's living in the moment, making the best of the circumstances that you're given. I agree with you. Like if they had channeled some of this energy that they were channeling on just, oh, we need to find a solution, oh, we got to get out of here, we got to distract ourselves. It's like they never really dealt with the gravity or the reality of their situation. And maybe if they had, like, things could have been different. But then I guess you could say that about anybody, right? Like, in a lot of
yeah,
ways on Earth we don't necessarily
life. Yeah,
deal with the gravity of our situation. We're
yeah.
too focused on getting around it or getting away from it. So
And we
yeah,
distract ourselves with things that might not be the best things, and yeah, I mean, it's a perfect analogy of
yeah,
what our lives do. And we try to find meaning in religion, in work, in family, even when maybe we're not ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
Different things we get ourselves distracted with. I'm gonna build puzzles, or I'm gonna play video games or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
it, it, I think it's a perfect analogy of everyday life.
Yeah. Wow. I feel that I've thought a lot more about this. I think when I saw it, I was like, I was like, oh, thought-provoking, interesting. But I think, like you, it was after I watched it, when I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it the next day and I kept thinking about different scenes, like it sort of grows on you, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. That's the reason like I said, that's why we're talking about it. It has become one of my
Yeah.
favorite movies, and it has become one of those um, frequent recommendations. I used to throw it
Yeah.
around to people. If you like sci-fi, check this out.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it.
I think, we
As I
haven't.
don't know, but as dark as it is, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, I think too, like we haven't mentioned it a whole lot, but visually too. I mean, it's got a lot
Oh,
of really great scenes visually that are really interesting, and they kind of remind me a little bit of the stuff that Alexander Garfield does, or not Alexander. Who am I trying to say?
Garland, Garland.
Alice
Yeah.
Garland does, or like
Oh,
Denis
yeah.
Villeneuve. Those kinds of directors that are a little bit more like take really visually interesting takes on sci-fi.
It's very, very economical. It's a very
Yeah.
economical uh, production design,
Hmm.
and that looks good.
Yeah.
But you know that they're doing a lot with less, with little resources. I don't think this
Yes,
has
I agree.
like a big budget, but
No, no,
I
definitely
agree.
not.
It does look good. For example, I've heard people the whole look of the ship is basically like you said, like a mall.
Hmm.
Um, and I somebody told me once, but the ship looks like a mall, and yeah, that's the purpose. That's what they're going for. This is a ship that is traveling through and fro to, so that's what it is. It's like you said, a cruise ship. That's
Yeah.
basically it.
Yeah, I mean it's meant for civilians and it's meant for like their comfort, and um it's not meant to be a permanent place. It's
Yeah,
not a warship. It's not, it's not designed for those things. And yet that ends up being their entire life. And yeah, you're right. It's very humble, and it's definitely low budget, so it's not like quite as flashy as maybe some of those directors that I mentioned, but there are, I think, echoes of what aesthetically they were shooting for. And also I think, like you said, okay, it does look like a mall, and there are even scenes that just look like they're at like the airport, or something like that, but like
yeah,
I like you said, I think that's also intentional because they're in like a very fake looking place, like I think about when there's a scene with like the two mothers and their son, and they're out playing, in air quotes, outside, and the adults look very depressed because they're like, we're not outside, we're like
yeah.
in another room, and then the son kind of, he can't tell because it's his reality, like we talked about. And I think the aesthetic of it really like adds to all that as well.
Yeah, yeah, and some of these scenes where you see people around them, a lot of people are just lumbering around because
Hmm.
a lot of people are just walking aimlessly because they just have nothing to do.
Yeah, yeah. Like you said, if they had channeled some of that energy into like giving people something to do, maybe that would have helped a little bit, but they did
Yeah,
not do that. It's true like societal collapse, towards the end especially, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Very, 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 very dark, and,
Yeah.
and we haven't even touched the thing with the child, but yeah, it's
Oh,
quite
that's
sad.
right, yeah. Yeah, you're alluding to, there's people in this situation, some of them cannot mentally handle it. And so there
Yeah,
is like a really tragic scene with the mother and the child.
yeah, yeah, and it's again. so many things going there because like I said before, there's the circumstances that led to her being pregnant. There are the different ways that both their lives and careers have, which I mentioned, have taken, where all of a sudden the MR is all busy, all important,
Mm-hmm.
and her partner is maybe not so much.
Yeah.
So maybe she feels like she is lesser now, quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote lesser. Um, but also there's the impending doom of where they are and what they're
Yeah.
heading to, which is nowhere. So there are too many things going on that will lead her to that decision. So yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, they're in a really bleak situation. It's not like, you know, I mean, you have empathy for that character because you're thinking, yeah, I mean, they're like one of the other characters said, they're in a floating coffin. So at the end of the day, it's
yeah,
not like there's a bright future for anybody, and that's a huge burden, I think, for her to have to carry, to have that knowledge that she's raising this child and that he doesn't have a future. That's very difficult. So yeah.
yeah. Sarcophagus. I think that's
Yeah.
one of my favorite lines. I think
Yeah.
we're in a sarcophagus.
Yeah. Pretty accurate.
Yeah.
um are there any other aspects of this movie that we haven't touched on that you had some notes about that you wanted to explore?
Um, I think that we pretty much brushed over most of the things that I wanted to talk about. Um, I think that the I would have liked maybe a bit more. I don't know, but I think that I like the film just as it is. But I've always been wondering about what are the whole mechanics of this Mima, which
Mm-hmm.
take this it takes over like half of the film, but then it's destroyed,
Yeah.
and we don't know much more about it. And maybe it's one of those things that I would have liked to maybe know a bit more about this. um I think that's left like hanging and explained. but
That's
but yeah,
true.
no, other than that, I again, I love the movie, which is the title of the podcast. um I love it, and it's, I don't know why, but I just kept going to it, and it just gets under my skin and makes me think, and I don't know.
I really, yeah, no, I agree. I like movies that are kind of, I'm looking at some of the reviews and some of the takes on it. It's fairly well reviewed, but then some people write things like, well, it's
Dull.
boring or it's
Yeah.
slow. Yeah. And I actually like movies that are a slow burn and are a little bit, in air quotes dull, because sometimes certain concepts, I think you need time to really like digest them and think, or to understand what the characters are going through. They're going through a very dull experience, a very dull life. And so I think it makes sense that the movie gives you that time and space to feel what the characters are
Yeah.
feeling. And it's not a sci-fi that's going to have a bunch of exciting twists and turns. It's an allegory, and it's a time to kind of sit with these characters and live their experience. So I think that that's good. And most of the movies, honestly, that I like probably fit that description. So I agree. I think you pitched it well there, and summarized well why you keep coming back to it. If you were going to tell somebody that's like never seen this movie before, how do you describe it to them? Like, how are you plugging it?
Oh man. I would say to anybody that likes sci-fi, I think, if you like sci-fi, if you like, I don't know, 2001, if you like uh, High Life from Claire Denis. I think there are a lot of similarities there as well. Um, I think you can enjoy this. I think it's a film that has a lot of layers, a lot of interesting characters. It's and gives you things to think about life and humanity. Um, what you think about that might depend on your take on the film. um, but I think it's thought-provoking. I think that's the most that I can say. Uh, I don't like to say films X or Y film is not for everybody, um, but it might depend on your uh, how you take Blick films. But yeah,
Yeah, I would agree with that. It also, like, when I was watching it, I was thinking about movies like Annihilation
yeah,
or Melancholia, where
yeah.
there's sort of like a hopelessness, despair, inevitability that characters are experiencing.
There's another film I'm completely drawn to. Melancholia is
Yeah, I like
uh,
that movie
yeah,
too. I watched it and was really struck by it. And I
yeah,
feel the same way about Annihilation too.
yeah,
Some really interesting concepts in that movie. But that are worth pondering and thinking about. If you like to ponder, if you like to think, I think this is definitely a movie that will let you do that.
yeah.
Um, well, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Carlo. Thank you for coming on. This was a really great discussion. I feel like I had one experience with the movie, but through us talking about it, I feel like I had a different one, and I'm going to want to go back and look at it again. And I wanted to give you an opportunity one more time. Anything else that you want to plug, or if you wanted to mention your show again for our listeners so they can go check it out.
I know. Again, I thank you for having me, and I'm glad to know that you enjoy the film. It's one of those things that when you recommend something that it's obscure, that it's not like the usual thing, it's good to know that people well received it well. So thanks for having me. And like I said, I have my show, The Movie Loot, which is available on every podcasting platform. You can look for it. You can check out our back catalog. We're again, like I said, in a bit of a hiatus. I'm trying to get back on the horse. I have a couple of episodes already recorded that I'm in the process of editing. I have a couple of episodes that are preparing to be recorded. But I have plans to get back on it so people can check it out. Like I said, the concept is I start with a guest. We choose a couple of categories of what to watch. Then we talk about what we watch, or I talk about a certain topic with a guest. I have episodes on zombie movies. I have episodes on specific directors and David Fincher, Stanley Kubrick. So you can check for that. And again, like I said, if there's any Spanish speaking listener or anybody from Puerto Rico, you can check also my new podcast, Popcorn con Mavi, which is dedicated to Puerto Rican films. And it's available on YouTube. And you can find me on Blue Sky and on Twitter at ThiefCGT, TSIEFCGT. I like to engage with people, talk movies, or talk whatever. So just look for
Great.
me and we can talk.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope to have you back again soon.
Yeah, just name the day. I'll be here.